Football Guys staffer Steve Buzzard won the FanDuel Live Final last weekend. His projected roster percentages are going to help us decide who to start and fade this week. And we're going to identify the trap players on teams with nothing but pride to play for. This is the Football Guys Daily Fantasy Power Grid. I'm Austin Lee, and I'm joined by John Lee, Ryan Hester, and Devin Knotts. During the next hour, we're going to get you ready for the Week 16 main slate on DraftKings and FanDuel, and we might mention a couple of ideas for that special Yahoo slate over there. They're running the the $1 million baller with $250,000 worth of overlay. So stay tuned. We'll try to slip in some tips for that one. We're going to go to Vegas though first. John, tell us, what are the spreads telling us? And what team should we be investing in this week?
You almost caught me off guard. It's not like I haven't done this 15 weeks in a row. The top team this week is a road favorite with the running back who hasn't practiced yet this week. The LA Rams, 14-point favorites over Arizona. We'll talk about this when we get there, but whoever's running the ball in Los Angeles, or in this case in Phoenix, against Arizona, we need to be talking about. Whether it's John Kelly or Todd Gurley, that person would be very, very relevant. So 14-point favorite, 30 points implied team total. And after that, we have a lot of home favorites, which is, what I gravitate towards. New Orleans against Pittsburgh. So we're looking at Mark Engram potentially as a GPP prospect. As a GPP prospect. Alvin Kamara's got plenty of snaps. He's out snapping Mark Engram recently. New England's Indianapolis at the Giants. We'll talk about Marlon Mack and whether or not he is cash or GPP game viable. Dallas, Ezekiel Elliott, is he going to rebound this week as a 7-point home favorite against Tampa Bay? And Cleveland, what's going on? They're a 9-point favorites over Cincinnati. What year are we in? It's a really interesting week. I think there's a lot of different ways to go this week because of all the injury situations, the playoff implications, and Vegas. I did the Vegas value chart on Tuesday. I had to update it tonight. That we're recording on Thursday night because of all the different occurrences that are happening. Cam Newton is out. We'll talk about all these different things. But it really is a rapidly evolving week, and I think there are a lot of different ways to go this week. So it's something that with the holidays coming, I think a lot of people are going to be maybe understudying, underperforming, and so I think there's a good edge to be had for those of you who are watching. So stay tuned. I think we've got about 50 minutes worth of really good information for our viewers and listeners.
Yeah, and speaking of good information, we've got 2 special articles over at footballguys.com this week. Steve Buzzard won that $500,000. He's going to do a write-up about his experience at the FanDuel Live Final. And one of our subscribers came in third at that FanDuel Live Final, Joe Shin. He's also got an article up to talk about his experience there. So be sure to check out those couple of articles. We should have those up later in the week. And then John mentioned it. It's kind of an interesting week of totals. There's only one game on the main slate that's over 48 points. That's that Pittsburgh at New Orleans game. But there's that sneaky Sunday night football game that we usually don't talk about because it's kind of off the main slate, but it is on that Yahoo main slate. So I think that's going to be a popular play at Yahoo this week. Let's talk about quarterbacks. Ryan, I'm going to come to you first. Let's talk about some QBs. The biggest note here is that Cam Newton is out. He will not be starting for the rest of the season. Let us know if that impacts your opinion about who to start here. And Nick Foles is going to be starting again for the Eagles. Looks like Aaron Rodgers is going to play, but I'm a little nervous about it because Green Bay has been eliminated from the playoff race. So I don't think I'll be playing him.
There's no need to be worried about it.
No, you think he's going to go?
He's going to play the full game. He wouldn't play. He wouldn't start if he's not going to finish the game. So, you may have other reasons why you don't want to play him, but I'm not concerned about Rodgers. I think that they would just shut him down if he was concerned.
I agree.
I think we'll get into running backs and receivers, but that's, I think, where you need to be worried about the mid-game pull of somebody who kind of tweaks something, right? But, in terms of quarterbacks this week, we were kind of talking before the show about there's not a lot of great options this week. So it's a little tough, but in cash games, last week we saw a lot of the high dollar running backs that were not in great matchups. So we were able to go down to lower priced guys, and we'll get back to running back obviously later. But, this year has been the year of the high price running back, the do it all running back. And I think we're going to get right back there this week. So in my cash games, I'm looking to get cheaper at quarterback. And for me, that's Nick Foles. I mean, the guy looked really impressive last week against a pretty tough defense on the road. And especially if you're playing at FanDuel, he's only 6,000 there. And on the evaluator tool, that puts him at a much more favorable price relative to the rest of the quarterbacks. But even on DraftKings, even on Yahoo, I like Foles as a low-priced guy to enable me to get, 2 high-end running backs and even perhaps a high-end wide receiver in there, depending on how low you want to go and your kind of wide receiver 3 or tight end spot also. The thing with Foles that I really like is that, Houston has a tough, if you just look at raw fantasy points against, they're a tough matchup. But if you look at their resume, they have faced Blaine Gabbert, Eli Manning, the Josh Allen, Jay Peterman duo. I guess Josh Allerman could really be the way to say that.
I know that guy.
The Blake Bortles, Cody Kessler duo, Brock Osweiler, and Case Keenum. So they faced almost nobody at quarterback. Sam Darnold had 250 and 2 touchdowns last week, which was almost 5x his DraftKings salary. So this defense doesn't scare me despite looking at their raw fantasy points against totals. And Philly's a team who is going to gain their yards via the pass. We've seen that over the last couple of years. So I like Foles a lot. I also think that that Tom Brady is again too cheap. The game script being home favorite against Buffalo does suggest that they're going to have a lot of running production. But historically in these games where New England has been a big favorite, Brady still performs okay. I mean, there's still multiple touchdowns to be had before they get up and lean on the running game. So I think Tom Brady, especially at DraftKings 5,900, is too cheap. And those are both cash game plays. And I guess I'll hand over the rest of the cash and the GPP calls to everybody else.
Devin, what do you think? You like these calls? You got other guys?
I like Foles. I can't do Brady in cash. The upside isn't there. And without Josh Gordon, I mean, the Bills' defense has been pretty good. The last 6 quarterbacks they've faced have averaged just 152 yards, and one is top 200. So I'm not there on Brady. I don't know. He's just not doing enough consistently.
Do you like anyone at that same price range, or are you just having a whole different kind of roster?
I'm either going up or I'm going down. So okay. I'm either going with Deshaun Watson or Nick Foles, and Deshaun Watson is my top guy at that. If I'm paying up, simply because, I mean, look, it's Philadelphia. We've been picking on them for a majority of the year. 269 yards in every game since week 4 that they've given up. Every game except one, which was Mark Sanchez and the Colt McCoy debacle in which McCoy got hurt. But I mean, this is a Eagles defense that's missing 4 of their 5 starting corners. They allowed 455 yards and 3 touchdowns to Dak Prescott 2 weeks ago, which, I mean, come on, right? For Dak to throw 54 times and 455 yards, has he ever thrown 455? I don't think so. And they allowed Marcus Mariota to throw 344 earlier in the season. This is a horrendous secondary. So for me, it's one side or the other. It's a matter of, can you get comfortable with the cheap running backs? At the moment, I think I'm favoring Foles in cash and then Deshaun Watson in GPPs. I do the weekly matchups for Football Guys, and typically we have about 5 or 6 teams that have great matchups. This week we only have 1, and that's Houston. So there's a lot of teams that just didn't. There's a lot of teams that just don't. A lot of good quarterbacks aren't matched up against bad defenses, is what I'm trying to say. So Watson spending up, Foles going down. Drew Brees, if you want a guy, I don't trust him outside though, so I would just use him as a GPP flyer.
Games in New Orleans.
Okay.
So I was just going to ask, on DraftKings, Watson is priced literally right between Roethlisberger and Brees, and you'd rather Watson?
I'd still rather go Watson, yeah.
Okay.
John, I haven't heard Andrew Luck's name mentioned here, and Steve Buzzard has him pretty high on the percent rostered list. Is Luck a guy you would consider this week for GPPs, or who else are you looking at?
Well, I mean, I think for GPPs, because they have what I'm looking at is the fourth highest implied team total. Certainly, when that happens, you've got to consider them for GPP. But they're a 9-point home favorite. We'll talk about what I think about who I'm targeting there at the running back section. It kind of gives it away, but it's not a guy that I think I want to go after this week against the Giants. Foles, I think, will make it a consensus here. I think that he's the guy that you want to try to go after in cash. It's kind of strange, right? Like Nick Foles, cash. But he's 4,700. He's going up against a Houston defense that is pretty strong up front. They get a front seven that is fairly stout. There's some questions in this Philadelphia Eagles backfield. And so it just makes a lot of sense to go with Nick Foles at 4,700 and spend up elsewhere. We'll talk about where you can do that here in a bit. And if you don't like that, Dak Prescott, I think, is reasonable at 5,700. He's a guy that is if I'm not just punting the position, because we don't love the position, but if we're not doing that, Dak Prescott against Tampa Bay, I think they've improved. For what it's worth, I think they've improved since the beginning of the season. But at 5,700, I think he's still in play with Amari Cooper and Blake Jarwin. We'll talk about him in a bit. So that's the way I'm going. In GPPs, Big Ben at New Orleans. This could be a shootout. And Aaron Rodgers at the Jets. That's the one I like there, and I think Devin kind of topped it off for me. The Jets aren't doing a whole lot. And then they've got a lot of questions in the backfield this week. 6,300. He's a guy that I like. I actually like both sides of that game for what it's worth. I think that Sam Darnold could also be GPP viable in a game that could shoot out, because neither one of those defenses want to be on the field in Week 16.
Devin, you brought up the red black-eyed Joe for Dak Prescott. He should be fairly highly owned this week, have a high roster percentage. What's your thinking there? Is it the improved Tampa Bay defense?
No, it's just I'm all in on Ezekiel Elliott.
Okay, gotcha. Well, that's a good transition.
I mean, if I'm spending up at one player this week, it's Elliott. I think the matchup it's fantastic. So 4 of the last 5 games, Tampa has allowed a running back to go over 100 yards. It's a linebacking core that is one of the worst in the league. It's the perfect spot for Elliott, who's doing everything this year. I mean, he's 282 yards away from, and I'm not saying he's going to get there, but from his rookie season in which he ran for 1639. So is there a little motivation to top that? I don't know, but since Quan Alexander went out for Tampa, Devante Bond and Riley Bulla have been probably the 2 worst linebackers in football. So if you can get past Vita Vea and Gerald McCoy, there's a ton of room to run on this defense.
Yeah, and that's with some question marks on some of these other high-end running backs, like Todd Gurley is dealing with a knee injury. He didn't practice on Thursday. McVay says he intends to play Gurley, but keep a really close eye on that situation. Let's transition to running backs here. John, tell me about your running back picks. We'll come back to you, Devin, for some more running backs.
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely agree with Devin for once, even though Devin, what is the sweater, man? Ohio State Buckeyes with a non-Buckeye leaf or whatever that is. Is that a poinsettia? What's going on there?
It's Christmas, you Grinch.
Just an ugly sweater. It doesn't have to be a good design. It's an ugly sweater.
Okay, I
don't like Ohio State, but I like the sweater for what it's worth.
All right. Well,
I hate to admit it. I hate to boost him up at all. But
yeah, where's your UCF Christmas sweater there, Ryan? Oh,
we don't do sweaters in Orlando, just T-shirts.
Oh, that's true. That's a good point.
So I'm with Zeke this week against Tampa Bay. If you're spending up,
where he went to college, right?
That's why I brought it up.
I liked your rhyme there. That was pretty good.
That's why I brought it up. So at $9,000, he's where I'm spending money this week against Tampa Bay. I think Devin already kind of outlined why we should be considering that. And after that, I think Nick Chubb against Cincinnati. We've seen Cincinnati just bleed yardage to running backs. They're a big favorite. We talked about this already at the top of the show. So if you're spending up beyond Zeke, and I think you can do that this week because there's not a lot that I love at the wide receiver position. Looking at my notes, it's probably Chubb thereafter. And on the low end, I don't know. It'll be interesting. Matt Breida at 4,200 against Chicago. Is that a guy that we're interested in? I mean, the projections are there. I agree. Number one defense against the run, but he's going to see a slew of volume. And Tevin Coleman against Carolina.
Breida's been battling with an injury a little bit, kind of off and on, right? He got a limited practice Thursday. But I see Devin saying no on Breida. Is that the matchup, Devin?
Yeah, the matchup is horrendous.
I agree. I agree the matchup's horrendous. And probably, because I'm not even sure that Breida is going to make it to the a lot of our viewers and listeners' pinch points, whether or not it's going to be Breida. But one person that is highly projected on our projections, I'm looking, he's a notch below Zeke Elliott, and I don't have H value pulled up, but I suspect based on what I'm looking at, he's either at the same level or maybe a notch above. What about Christian McCaffrey, guys? Let's talk about him. Christian McCaffrey, he's got a quarterback who largely we don't know, right? It's kind of an unknown quantity. And how does that affect this offense? How do we think that Christian McCaffrey is going to go without Cam Newton? Are you going to be willing to pay $8,800 for him in cash games, or is he a GPP only play? And I'll point out that Steve Buzzard, he's got him as the number 3 owned or rostered running back on the slate this week. I don't know. I'm actually thinking about fading Christian McCaffrey. I'm curious what you guys think.
Now, Tyler Heineke, he's a pretty mobile quarterback as well, right? I mean, we haven't seen him play a ton in the pros, but Devin, what do you know about this guy?
He's not that mobile. He's more of a traditional passer.
Okay.
At least he wasn't at Old Dominion. I was looking earlier, and there were a lot of negative rushing yard games, and it's not really a great sign for a college quarterback. So he ran for 139 yards his year. So he's more of a drop back traditional guy. I do like McCaffrey on DraftKings simply because Heineke has shown a tendency at Old Dominion to throw to his running backs. So,
and he's playing Atlanta.
I think fine. I think if he's trying to panic and facing in his first start, he's going to go back to what he's comfortable with, and throwing to the running back is definitely a possibility, and he has a great one to throw to. So I look at it as a receiving option. I look at McCaffrey more as a receiver this week than I do as a running back, and anything that you get from the running back standpoint is upside. I can't do it on FanDuel because the price is $9,300, I think.
It is.
And you only get the half point. So I think he has a high floor. I don't love him, but I'm surprised he's the third highest owned player.
That's my feeling, Devin. I don't know. At 20%, which is where Steve Buzzard has him at this moment, that feels I'm this close, and it's Thursday. Read my article on Saturday for my final take on it. But I'm this close to thinking about Xing him out of my lineups completely because they've got a 20.3 implied team total. So his upside is 2 touchdowns, meaning nobody else does anything on that offense. I don't know. It's scary to me.
It's possible that Steve's numbers were Wednesday numbers, and I don't know that the Cam Newton news came out before he released these numbers. So he'll probably revise him down.
That's a good point. The other thing, we got to think of it in context of the slate, right? So he's in the cash game lineup that I put together today, which is obviously post the Cam Newton news, because – again, John alluded earlier, we don't have a lot of high-end wide receivers that we're in love with this week.
We do.
Same. I said a lot. I have one, but I said a lot. It doesn't seem like a 2 wide receiver week. To me, it seems more like a 2 running back week. And is McCaffrey with Heineke, significantly worse than with Cam Newton with no shoulder? I mean, we don't know, right? There's a chance that it's not. And the matchup is still very good against Atlanta. They allow, again, a lot of receptions to running backs and yards to running backs out of the backfield, and that's what McCaffrey can do. And just one last sort of quirk is that I said he's in my cash build. That was on DraftKings, which DraftKings is the site that normally adjusts for matchup. He's actually less expensive on DraftKings than on FanDuel by $500 with a good matchup with full PPR. And so even in the context of with the evaluator tool, so considering the rest of the running backs and where he's at, he's much more favorable on DraftKings, which is kind of weird. Usually you see that when players are in a bad matchup, that they're more favorably priced on DraftKings. So, subject to change, of course, but I think that the floor is there. I think he's still a good play.
I think you pay up for Gurley or you go down to Saquon.
And I was going to ask about Saquon because Steve has his percentage his rostership pretty high as well.
I can't get behind Chubb just because the touches have been a little bit inconsistent and his snap counts seem to be decreasing a little bit over the last several weeks. So I don't know if they're trying to slow him down. I don't know what they're trying to do there in Cleveland, but
you would be okay with going with Gurley at $2,000 more, given his current health situation? He hasn't practiced all week.
Well, it depends. I believe that they won't play Gurley if he's not healthy. I think if he plays, he's going to play because McVay came out and said we're not going to risk him for the playoffs, which tells me that if he's playing and he's getting any touches at all, he's fine, and he's going to get. And he's going to get.
He gets like 12 or 15 though, and they don't by a lot, and they take him out, right?
Right.
Yeah. Ryan's
he could have 2 touchdowns at that point,
but he also could not. I mean,
fine.
They have 3 passing touchdowns,
and if he has,
and a defensive
for what it's worth, if he has 2 touchdowns, he also needs 100 yards and a couple catches at his salary to really pay off.
Fair.
I don't know. Like I'm thinking we'll see what happens on Friday's practice. But if he doesn't practice this week, John Kelly could be for me in GPPs. He might be a guy. I just talked about Xing out Christian McCaffrey. I might do the exact opposite with John Kelly. And he's an unknown entity for me. I'll completely admit it. But at a 14-point favorite against Arizona's rush defense, I would love to pay $4,000 to get a piece of this offense. It just looks too good for me.
It's worth noting that they signed C.J. Anderson this week.
Yeah,
he hasn't had enough time to learn to play.
He's getting the goal line carries though, right? John Kelly's 195 pounds. That's the concern, is that John Kelly's not a big back.
Yeah, I agree with John that there's not enough time for Anderson, but there have been blurbs I've read that say that they'll split time, which just seems a little aggressive. So I wanted to bring it up because people –
It's fair.
People will wonder why. So
yeah. Let's bring up a few other names that are in maybe changed situations. We saw Aaron Jones go to IR. Is there any interest in Jamal Williams?
No.
Yes.
Devin says no. Ryan says yes. Tell me a little bit more, Ryan.
I mean, if I change the way that I'm building the lineups right now with the 2 high-end running backs, it's just the volume is going to be so significant. They literally have 2 running backs on the roster right now, and one of them they signed Monday. It's Capri Bibbs is their second running back.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So that's it. I mean, and the coach, he came up with a little bit of an injury this week, but the coaches the next day said he's going to be heavily involved, and they don't have a choice. And last week he was heavily involved after the Jones injury against the Bears, who we just talked about are a really tough matchup, and did very well. So just volume alone, there's a good floor there for not a high-end price. So that's
and any interest in a running back in this Jets backfield? Elijah McGuire. He's kind of in the mid-range of ownership here of rostership on Steve Sheets. Is that a sneaky GPP play at all, or is this kind of digging too deep on a week where there's other options?
I think it's fine, especially on FanDuel at 5,700. I think it's one of the top ways to save money. He's going to get 17. I mean, he's had 17 and 18 carries and 3 receptions in each of his last 2 games. So, and he scored a touchdown in both the games. He hasn't done much outside of it, but he's faced 2 really good run defenses in the Bills and the Texans. Green Bay is no joke. I mean, their run defense is pretty good, but McGuire, if I'm going down, especially on FanDuel where He's 5,700. He's one of my favorite guys. And then can I just mention one more since it wasn't?
Yeah, do it.
Marlon Mack, I think I think John alluded to it earlier, is in a fantastic spot this week. So going up against the Giants, who they've allowed 121 yards per game this year. They did shut down the Redskins last 2 weeks ago, but then Derrick Henry ran all over him, which so I think he's very intriguing. I think that he came back last week and looked sharp. So I have no issue playing Marlon Mack, even in cash. I think he's a fine play if some of the other value doesn't materialize. He's a little too high on FanDuel at 7,000, but I think at 5,500 on DraftKings, he's in a perfect spot.
Yep, I like that call.
One last thought.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, sorry, two last thoughts. There's one running back I'm fading this week. It's Joe Mixon. I just don't know that Cincinnati shows up. I think they're going to get blown out. So I'm not high on Mixon. I think you can go higher or lower in price and do better. And then what are we doing with Jalen Samuels, assuming that James Conner is out? I mean, I think we'd be remiss to not mention this game in every section, at least part of it. It's the marquee game of the week.
No,
so
thanks.
His price is way up this week. I mean, as it should be. So is anybody interested in it in any sort of format? John?
Not for me. I mean, okay. I think New Orleans
matchup's too good.
Yeah, New Orleans has a number 3 DVOA rush defense. The way that they playing defense right now, you're funneling action to the pass.
He's a pass catcher.
I mean, he is, but what's the best? What's the number of catches that he's had? I'm trying to pull it up on the fly here.
7, I think.
I mean, he's only played 2 full games. I mean, I'm with you. I'd rather we all say no than not acknowledge it at all. That's all. So.
Yeah, I mean, so Devin's right. He had 64 yards in that loss against Oakland. And so if you think that New Orleans wins this one handily, and I think that, Vegas is projecting it as such, what are they, 5.5-point favorites? Maybe that's the case, but he's no longer 37 and 4,400. He's much more expensive this week. So I think there might be better ways to go.
Okay. Agreed. He's very, very cheap on Yahoo, though, if you're playing that.
That's a good note.
So is Jamal Williams.
Nice. Last question here, and then we'll move on to wide receivers. Does the Frank Gore injury open up any interest in another Dolphins running back, or is that just like you're digging too deep on a week with other options?
No, but Kalen Ballage will outscore Kenyon Drake.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too, but I'm not really interested anyway. Okay.
Can I pull a Devin here and ask about 2 other guys?
Go for it.
Before we move on.
Love it.
What about Peyton Barber against Dallas? I mean, Dallas last week were susceptible to Marlon Mack. Marlon Mack tore them up, right? Peyton Barber's 3,600, and I'm
love Peyton Barber.
Yeah,
you bring him up every week.
I mean, but think about it. So Jameis Winston has been back for 5 games. Let me finish this. Peyton Barber's touched the ball 20, 16, 15, and 21 times. That's pretty darn good at $3,600.
His price is still $3,600 for a reason.
But he scored a touchdown in 4 of the 5 games.
In what sort of contest are you saying?
GPPs, not cash games.
Yeah.
GPPs. 3,600. He's averaging 17, 18 touches a game, and he scored a touchdown in 80% of the games that Jameis Winston has played since he came back.
Yeah, on a normal week, I could get behind it. The problem is, I think there's just so many guys that are 5,500, 5K and less. That, I mean, he's not really a receiver. He's basically a poor man's Jordan Howard, which I agree with that. Him and Jordan Howard are basically the same guy. So I don't know. I think that on this week, if you want to put him in, a couple lineups, fine. But I wouldn't have significant ownership on him.
Yeah,
I think that's fair. So I'm looking at Buzzard's projections for him right now. I don't see him on the list, so maybe that means 1%. I'll have him at 8%. I'm pretty sure.
You made a great case for him, but it is hard this week. Like just not this week. You did make a really good case for him, though. I'll say that.
All right, and I'll probably ruin this by asking, but I'm going to ask anyhow. Yeah, I was on a roll, but I'm going to shoot myself here. Leonard Fournette against Miami.
No.
I know what happened last week. I get it. I'm completely on board with it. But the guy is 4% owned on Buzzard's projections, and Miami has been dreadful against backs. You're in on this one. You like this one.
I do. I mean, there's a significant risk that they just don't even play him. But
they had him returning kickoffs last week.
I know, and David Williams. I mean, I get it. But for GPPs, this guy at 4%.
That's fair.
The price is laughable on DraftKings. What is he? 5,000?
I think 6,000 is what I got.
6,000 either way, but I wouldn't do it on FanDuel where you don't really need to do that. He's only 7,300 too, so he's not that cheap. But on DraftKings, I mean, I'm not saying I like him a ton, but if you're stuck in,
that's the point, though. These are the types of decisions that win people big money. And I'm looking at Austin's normalized strength of schedule. There's not a team in the league over the course of the season that's allowed more fantasy points to the running back position after his normalization than the Miami Dolphins. And yet this bell cow running back, and we saw what happened last week, so we can call him a bell cow or a bell beaver. I don't know what he is, but whatever. I just made that up.
I mean, it's a guy who ran 95 yards and 2 touchdowns against the Bills, who have a significantly better defense.
Correct.
And 95 yards and a touchdown against the Steelers. When he wants to play, he's matchup proof. The problem is, when does he want to play? Because I think he's the least motivated player in football.
Yeah. All right. I'm happy to move on to the wide receiver position because I got buy-in from Peyton Barber, 2 teams in Florida with their running backs. Peyton Barber.
8%'s too high, though. If you want to go 3 or 4% on Barber, fine. 8% is too high.
I agree. All right. Let's if you've made it this far, please give our YouTube video a like and hit that little subscribe button and the bell that pops up next to it so you get alerts when our new videos post. Let's talk about wide receivers. We mentioned it a little bit earlier. Josh Gordon is out, suspended, so maybe that gives a boost to some of the other New England receivers here. We're keeping an eye on a few other guys. I'll let the guys sort of mention it as they bring up their favorite plays. Devin, let's go to you first on wide receivers. Who do you like?
Start DeAndre Hopkins and move on.
Great.
It's the easiest week for DeAndre Hopkins, I think, in a long time. I talked about Deshaun Watson and why you should play him, and it's my favorite stack of the week. But I mean, this is a Eagles secondary that allowed 10 receptions, 217 yards, and 3 touchdowns to Amari Cooper. 10 receptions, 157 yards, and a touchdown to Tre'Quan Smith. They have been burned, and when they get burned, they have nobody that can even, that's in the same league as Hopkins. So I think that this is an easy one. I'm paying up for Hopkins. I'll let the other guys talk, and then I'll jump back in.
All right, Ryan, who you got?
Yeah, my pay up guy is Michael Thomas. He's 500 cheaper than Hopkins on DraftKings. I do agree. I like the Hopkins matchup as well, of course, but look at what slot receivers are doing to the Steelers in the last 4 games. And Thomas does run a lot of routes from that area. So Julian Edelman had 7 for 90. Keenan Allen had 14, 148 and a touchdown. The immortal Seth Roberts had 5 for 76. And Emmanuel Sanders had 7 for 86 and a touchdown dating back to that game in Denver. So the slot receivers or receivers that are even capable of running some routes from the slot are crushing the Steelers. T.J. Watt, as good as he is at a lot of things, should not be covering wide receivers, nor should any of the Steelers linebackers, yet they do it frequently.
There's no way they're going to put T.J. Watt on Michael Thomas. There's no chance.
Him and another linebacker were covering Keenan Allen on at least half a dozen of his 14 catches.
I get it, but
it was absurd.
Thomas does not have the floor. I don't think he has the floor of other guys. In cash, I don't think he's safe enough to play.
I don't know. I kind of, when I start with cash games, I look for these narrow production distributions, I call them, which is probably the worst way to say it. But New Orleans and Pittsburgh are two of the narrowest in terms of where the production is going with these teams. It's Thomas and Kamara. And with New Orleans, the GPP play, I might as well just get into my one cheap GPP play. And it's very on brand because he's a UCF guy, but it's Traquan Smith. And I think that he's another piece of that game that if you don't want an expensive piece that you can go to, but, back to Thomas, the guy's getting double-digit targets in a game with a over 50, unless it happens to be another low-scoring game like Pittsburgh and New England was last week, surprisingly. But if you believe that total, there have to be targets going to Thomas, and they're going to be high-value targets like they always are from Drew Brees in the Superdome. I mean, these are things that are very appealing. I agree with Hopkins being a good call too, but Thomas is the high-end receiver that just stuck out to me first.
Traquan Smith's averaging has 2 total receptions over his last 3 games.
So back to Traquan. It's GPP only, but back to Traquan. His last home game.
Burning money is what it is.
His last home game was week 11 against Philly, and he went off, as you alluded to. He's played 3 straight road games. He hasn't done anything, as you also just mentioned. He's still playing the second most snaps among all wide receivers on that team. He's still going to be on the field in what could be a high-scoring game, a good game environment. If the Steelers do make adjustments and decide to cover Michael Thomas with better personnel, then he's on the field as a Drew Brees receiver. It's a GPP play, but that's what came out. If I'm looking at that game and I'm looking to get something different, he's the guy that I'm looking to.
How much is he?
4K.
It's definitely different.
5,100 FanDuel.
I mean, I've been a Traquan Smith lover all season, but it's pretty tough recently.
It's been bad lately, but
yeah.
All right, let's move on. Enough about Traquan Smith.
Yeah, that's fair. It's a less important guy. John, talk to me about some receivers.
Robbie Anderson against Green Bay. I mean, the last couple of weeks, he's been a guy that's been getting a lot of targets. He's 4,500, and Green Bay doesn't have anybody that scares me in their secondary. And I kind of alluded to it earlier. I think this game has sneaky, I won't call it shootout potential, but I think, if you're one of these people that are in a state where gambling's legal on DraftKings and they have an app, I think this game goes over. I truly believe this game goes over the total this week. T.Y. Hilton against the Giants, 7,100 on the inside. I think this is a situation, as long as he's healthy moving into Sunday, and we'll see what happens. We record this a bit early, but as long as he's healthy. Last week, I X'd him out of my lineup. I totally did. 2 weeks ago, I was high on him when he had almost 200 yards receiving. I'd like to think that I've got a hold on him. I don't know whether I do, but I've nailed it 2 weeks in a row, so I'm going for 3 weeks. Maybe I'm playing with fire here. So he's a guy. The one guy I would absolutely love to have this week is Cooper Kupp. You guys remember Cooper Kupp? He was in the league not that long ago. But Robert Woods this week at Arizona. He's only 6,600. I think a lot of people are sour on this Rams offense because they floundered a couple weeks in a row. I'm just not sure Arizona matches up well against just about all of the skill players for the Rams. And I think this is a week where we see them break out.
There's a different receiver who's pretty enticing too.
Are you going to talk about Brandon Cooks?
Josh Reynolds. 19 targets in his last 2 games, still cheap.
Could be interesting. I really like this Rams offense this week.
I mean, Peterson's going to be on Cooks, right?
Yeah. There's also a narrative to be told that Jared Goff needs to get going again, right? So this is a good spot for him to do it.
If Gurley doesn't play, or if we think Gurley's limited, I think it's load up on Goff in the passing game. I think that Woods is in a great spot. I think that Reynolds is in a great spot too. It's the production hasn't been there. I think he's only caught 45% of his targets, but he's had 19 of them in the last 2 games.
So I'm actually kind of interested to talk about this. I mean, we're gonna disagree on it, but I heard Devin reference DeAndre Hopkins. I like the call. I do. I heard Ryan mention Michael Thomas. Also like that call. A little bit less. So Devin gets the heads up on that, because I think Joe Hayden maybe slows down Michael Thomas a bit, although I think he has a better quarterback. So maybe that levels it out. Nobody's talking about Devante Adams. Why can't we talk about Devante Adams against the Jets at that same price point? And the reason I bring this up is because somebody's going to pay up. There are a couple cheaper options at the running back position. What about Devante Adams against the Jets? This guy continues to get peppered with targets from Aaron Rodgers, and they're all within a few $100s of one another. Let's talk about Devante Adams and his cash game viability as well as his GPP upside.
I have no issue with Adams. I just like Hopkins a little bit more.
Same me with Thomas. I mean, it's a good call. It's a sound reasoning. David has him projected as the highest wide receiver, just raw points. So everything you said is right. The matchup's good. The target volume is great. So there's nothing wrong there. And if he ends up lower rostered than the other guys, then
I just don't think he has the upside that Hopkins has. Like when I look at Hopkins, I think realistically he has the highest upside of anyone on the slate. And
QD returns this week, right?
Game time decision potentially. We don't know.
And Lamar Miller might be out. So like there's a lot of guys. There's a lot to like in Houston.
So there's one guy that's pretty high on Steve's rostership that we haven't talked about. He's got 6 touchdowns in the last 7 games. He's got 500-yard games in his last 7. I'm talking about Julio Jones. I'm going to bring it up before Ryan does. He's high-priced. I take it you guys sort of have him.
Health is a major concern there.
Yeah.
Was it health?
Yeah.
He only played half of the game last game.
And he didn't practice on Thursday. He took part of a walkthrough, but he didn't practice.
He's not going to play this week.
You think he's out this week?
Yeah. There was a beat writer, I think his last name is Ledbetter, who's a very good Atlanta beat writer who sent out a very cryptic tweet of there's a certain someone you know who you should take out of your lineup this week. And it was obvious that he meant Julio Jones. So
excellent.
If he plays, sure. But more of a GPP call because I think he's 4th on the list of the high-end guys
He's the type of guy, though, that, like, he worries me when he's banged up because he just takes himself off the field on, 3rd and 13. And it's like, what are you doing?
Yep.
If you're only going to play on 3rd and 13. Don't play on 1st and 10 when you're running the ball.
Right. Yep. Completely agree.
The red zone, he's like that.
He just pulls himself out of he pulls a Randy Moss and just takes himself off the field.
Real quick, I gave John the red Joe here on T.Y. Hilton, not because I really disagree with the player, but there was a report coming out of the game last week that he made his ankle mad by playing on it. So Dr. Gene wrote that his status is more in doubt this week than probably last week. And if we recall, last week he didn't practice at all and went right up to game time decision. So just be aware of it. It's not that I disagree with the process or the guy or the targets or anything. Just note the health.
Yep. The other health situations we're keeping our eye on is it doesn't look like Odell Beckham Jr. is going to play this week, and it does not look like Tyler Boyd is going to play, although I don't know that you want any part of that Cincinnati situation. Deshaun Jackson might come back this week. I don't know that you're necessarily running after to play him. Any other last thoughts before we move to tight ends?
Yeah, what are we doing with Stephon Diggs at 7,300 on FanDuel? Detroit can't cover anybody. Like, if you're going to move the ball again, it's a must-win for Minnesota.
So why not play Adam Thielen then?
I like Thielen too. The price is, he's 7,600 on FanDuel. I like both of them.
Yeah,
honestly.
Thielen's the guy on my sheet tonight. He goes up against Lawson, and Lawson gives up 5 inches to him in the red zone. You get inside the red zone, and you give up five inches to anybody, you're going to get targeted inside the red zone. And Thielen has not done a whole lot recently. I'm trying to find. We're looking. They're about 9 and 8% respectively. So they're both about the same in terms of implied rostership. But for me, Thielen's the guy. I think he bounces back this week. But I get the Diggs call. It's just it's Thielen.
I can never pick either one of them. So honestly, when I'm making lineups, when I play multiple GPPs, I'll have one of each.
Right.
And they're almost always the same price or close.
Oh, recently they have been. Thielen historically has been more. And then what about Dante Pettis against the Bears? I know the matchup's tough, but I mean, how are they going to move the ball? Maybe the answer is they don't, but
Yeah.
he had 5 for 83 against the Seahawks, 3 for 49 in a touchdown against the Broncos, and then 5 for 129 and 2 touchdowns against the Seahawks. He's fast enough that we saw Devante Adams, have 120 yards against Prince Amukamara. Amukamara is kind of a gambler type corner who's been susceptible to getting burned. I don't know if I'm taking one 49er. He's incredibly cheap at 4,300 on DraftKings. So I would take Pettis over a guy like John Ross just because I don't trust John Ross at all.
That's fair. I agree with that take.
It's 500 more, but that's close.
I'll back that take up as well. But
whoa, John talking bad about John Ross. Let's go. Finally off the train.
John Ross is a big play receiver, and he's going to be the wide receiver one now. You can't be a big play receiver, and especially with Jeff Driscoll at quarterback. That's the other part, right? So Tyreek Hill is a big play receiver, but he's got a pretty darn good quarterback to get him the ball. Jeff Driscoll, not so much.
John Ross runs like Tarzan, plays like Jane.
Yeah, I heard this.
He's never had a catch longer than 39 yards, but he runs a 4.22 40. Like, how does that even make sense?
Yeah, he has like 5 touchdowns this year inside of 4 yards or something. It's crazy.
All right, let's move on to tight ends. No real notes here at all. Let's go to John first for tight ends.
I don't like a whole lot here this week. For me, it's Zach Ertz against Houston, 5,900 in cash. That's the way I'll probably be going because the only place I'm really spending up at the position, in cash games this week is Zeke Elliott against Tampa Bay. So I think I can afford to get Ertz in against Houston. And if I'm not mistaken, Houston, shouting out a number of times this week, to Austin, 23% higher than league average, which is, it's pretty darn high. I think it's 5th highest on the main slate. If you're punting, and you can punt this week, speaking of these Cincinnati receivers, the best you've got is John Ross. Why can't you go with my man CJ Uzomah?
Back to the Uzomah. Oh my goodness, you're getting all kinds of red black guy Joe here
against the Cleveland Browns at 3,300. I love to punt the position. Everybody knows that. I love to punt the position because it's so volatile. If the guy ends up with 3 catches and 40 yards, I'll take that and move on and spend my money where I think that there's more consistency elsewhere.
Since Devin tonight has used like a $500 delta as guys in the same price range, you could have David Njoku for $500 more, and he's so much more athletic, so much more involved, and just a better player.
That's 20% more. It's not $500 delta doesn't mean anything. We're talking about $3,000. It's 20%.
I'm just saying you could go from 33 to 38. I mean, find the money elsewhere.
Yeah.
John Ross and CJ Uzomah are the reason I said Joe Mixon's going to fail.
If you're going down to CJ Uzomah from Njoku and not finding $500 elsewhere,
agreed.
Like on this week where there's a ton of value, come on.
I agree 500 is a lot, John, for the record, but we just did a comparison of Hopkins and Thomas for 500, and we did a Pettis and Ross for 500. So I was just trying to say that 500 actually is a lot, but in this case, I'll find it.
Yeah. Devin, what do you think at tight end this week?
On FanDuel, it's simple. It's Eric Ebron at 6,100, and you just move on. It's not even really a debate. On DraftKings, the problem I have with Ertz is this. I mean, what do you have, 2 targets last week? I think he had one – maybe I turned the game off too early, but he had like 1 catch for 3 yards well into the second half. And, he had 3 for 22 last week.
You think that's a Foles thing?
He's dealing with an ankle injury, so that's a little bit of a concern. And is it a Foles thing? I don't know.
Early in the season, he had 11 for 94.
Absolutely.
Foles fed him last year.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, there's. I read some stuff this week. I mean, Foles targets him about as much as I'm pulling it up now. I mean, Foles targets Ertz as much as Wentz, basically, but the fantasy points are a little bit less with Foles than Wentz. So It's 9.1 targets a game with Foles, 7.5 with Wentz, but the fantasy points are about 1.5 in Wentz's favor.
I guess the concern is we've never seen Foles and Ertz together with Golden Tate, who's also a possession type guy. I don't know if it's anything. The ankle injury does worry me a little bit. But the problem is, like, are you going to go Eric Ebron over Ertz for 200 less? I don't know. For me, I'm probably going down to Evan Engram because Odell Beckham's out again, and Engram he's looked a lot better over the last couple of weeks. He had 8 for 75 last week against the Titans. And he's more of a GPP play. He's not a great cash game play because he's a speed type guy, and he has like 3 catches longer than 39 yards, which John Ross doesn't have in his career. And if you really want to go down, I'm going Ian Thomas just because I think that if Heineke's going to throw, he's going to throw to his running backs and he's going to throw to his tight ends. And he's 3,500.
Let's see.
Blake Jarwin's interesting too.
What about Chris Herndon over there, especially on DraftKings at his pricing? He's 3,100 over on DraftKings. If you're gonna punt the position, I know John likes to punt the position, so
yeah, I'd go Blake Jarwin over Herndon.
Green Bay is second worst last 5 weeks in the normalized strength of schedule to tight ends. So I don't mind Herndon, but there's only so much to go around there, and I'd prefer Robbie Anderson if we have to play a Jet.
At that same level, Jarwin has 7 targets over the past 2 games with Dak, and they're in a spot right now where obviously they need to win this week to lock up the division. There are a lot of incentivizing factors to get behind Jarwin at the same price or $100 less.
Yeah. John, Jarwin or Uzuma?
Are we talking cash or are we talking GPP? Sure. It's Uzuma.
All right.
Because Jarwin's like the 4th guy. Uzuma's the 2nd guy, maybe the 3rd guy.
He's not even a guy, though.
No, you guys are wrong on this. You're wrong on this.
The first time that CJ Uzuma scores 10 points in his 4-year career on FanDuel will be the first time he scored 10 points.
I mean,
you're wrong on this. They're 9-point underdogs. Are they going to be running the ball? They can run the ball for the first quarter, maybe the second quarter, but they got to throw the ball 3rd and 4th quarter. Are they going to throw it to a guy who runs a 4.2 40, running 40-yard 9 routes, or are they going to throw it to a guy as a possession receiver across the middle? It's going to be Uzuma. There's nowhere else to throw the damn ball.
You're right. They're going to throw it to Alex Erickson, who had 2 more catches than CJ Uzuma.
Or Cody Core, right? That's what you're going to tell me?
Maybe. I mean,
yeah.
The problem is Jeff Driscoll completed 42% of his passes last week.
I think we all agree on that much.
You want to tie your – I know volume is nice and a negative game script is nice, but you want to tie your tight end to a high-scoring team, believe it or not. And Cincinnati's not that team. I just real quick, Austin. I know we got to do.
Is that why we recommended Evan Engram earlier? Because the 19 points they're going to score this week.
Devin did, but at least he's an athlete. The other two more, just real quick. GPP plays with teams that might score points this week. Austin Hooper, just because Julio Jones is looking shaky and probably not going to play, and Carolina was bad against tight ends earlier in the year, and also Vance McDonald if you want a cheap piece of Pittsburgh. The matchup's horrible. The Saints are good against tight ends. Yep. That tends to be slightly noisy, though. He's your one Pittsburgh pivot. And John, as you can painfully attest to, he missed a 2nd touchdown last week by about a toenail. Sorry to bring it up.
Thanks.
But if you want to keep playing CJ Uzuma, you're going to feel more pain than that. So.
Yeah, and watch. If you're thinking about Austin Hooper, watch out for his injury situation. He's been nicked up. He got limited practice Thursday, so make sure he's playing if you're thinking about him. Let's talk about defenses. Devin, I like going to you first on defenses. Sure. You like to sort of like pay down on these things.
Carolina, if Julio Jones misses on FanDuel at 3,300, too cheap, and they're at home. So I think that's a good one. And then the other one that I like this week, it's a little bit risky, but the San Francisco 49ers, they're only, 3-point underdogs at home, which seems a little bit strange. And Mitchell Trubisky's had interception problems at 2,000 on DraftKings, their minimum price. So those are the 2 I'm looking at.
Nice. Ryan, who you got?
I'm going to go kind of off the board here a little bit, but super cheap GPP play. Houston has allowed the following number of sacks since week 9: 6 sacks, 5 sacks, 4 sacks, 4 sacks, 3 sacks, and 4 sacks. And they also allowed 7 sacks in 2 different games prior to week 9, 4.3 sacks a game since week 9, third most. And that's despite only 28 passing attempts per game in that span, which is the 7th fewest. So they're getting sacked a lot at a very high rate. And, sacks lead to fumbles, lead to interceptions, et cetera. So very, very cheap, 2,100 DraftKings, 3,200 FanDuel, the Eagles at home.
John, who do you have defense?
Defense, I think you can go with the Patriots against Buffalo this week. This is a week that I can get behind what Devin was saying, or what Devin has traditionally done. Pay down at the position this week. There's no reason to pay up. The Patriots against Buffalo. I think the Cowboys against Tampa Bay. Earlier in the season, Jameis Winston was a turnover machine. I don't know that anything has changed there. They're at home in maybe not a must-win situation, but a situation where they're going to be motivated to win. And then if you want to just, bump up a little bit, Josh Rosen he's turned the ball over quite a bit this season. And they're 14-point underdogs, so he's likely going to try to make some plays. He's 3,200 as well. So I think any of those 3 defenses are teams you can get behind.
Nice. All right. Let's see. Let's move on to parting thoughts, fellas. Maybe you've got an idea for a play over on the Yahoo slate. Maybe you've got a stack you didn't get a chance to mention. Let me know what you're thinking here. Let's see. John, what do you got?
So I think the one thing I'll say about Yahoo last week, first time I ever played at Yahoo, complete transparency there. I think I tripled or maybe quadrupled my money in their $20 GPP with $250,000 of overlay. Overlay is something that it's a bygone in this industry. So if you're playing $15 in DraftKings Millionaire Maker this week, I think you maybe just put an extra $5 and throw it into Yahoo's tournament, because there you have a much better chance of getting some ROI. Check out the evaluator, and you're going to see there are a few players. I'm looking at it right now. Kenny Galladay is super cheap this week. Looking Jalen Samuels is super cheap at the running back position. Lamar Jackson, Deshaun Watson is one of the guys that Devin talked about at the tight end position. Vance McDonald, I think I heard was mentioned earlier by Ryan. So there are a lot of ways to kind of tweak your ownership across the industry, and this is a winning way to go about your business. We're not allowed to talk about closing stacks anymore, but I'm going to say Nick Foles with Alshon Jeffrey against Houston, the combination, $10,000. You get to go against Sharice Wright, who in years past has been a guy we want to target. Cost you $10,000. I think those guys have two touchdown upside. Merry Christmas.
Ryan, what are your parting thoughts?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thanks to everybody for watching and listening our show. I mean, this is our last show, so it would be kind of rude to just not thank everybody. First of all, last show this year. Sorry, John gave me the red black.
He was kind of holding it with a certain finger too.
I think everybody's aware it's our last show this year. But yeah, no, especially those of you that have been around all season. I love interacting with everybody on Twitter, and the YouTube comments are hilarious, especially the ones that make fun of Devin or make any light of what he says. John's now wearing antlers, so this is perfect, along with his ho 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 shirt. So, but yeah, no, thanks everybody for sticking around with us and letting us have fun here every Thursday night. And I'm sort of amazed that like 3 people that I don't know watch this show. So the fact that thousands of you do is just overwhelming and really makes me happy. So thanks, and happy holidays to everyone, and happy New Year.
Devin, wrap us up here. What do you got?
Yeah, if we get enough comments below, Austin might let us do a wild card playoff show live in Las Vegas. So comment below if you want to see that. We'll bring in Joe and David and all the rest of the football guys for cameos during that. So comment below if you want to see a live show in Vegas, and I'll bring my stuff and we'll have some fun with it.
If you bring the mic and stuff, don't put that in your carry-on. I know this from experience. If you put it in your carry-on, make sure you put it separate like a laptop. It can cause trouble. Awesome. Thank you guys for sticking with us, for listening. We appreciate you guys, the listeners, the viewers, the commenters. Thanks for interacting with us on Twitter. It's been a really fun season. And I appreciate you guys sort of engaging with us. So this is our season finale, with the possible exception of a wild live episode for Wildcard Weekend when we're
comment below
if that might interest you, and then Devin might help.
We need a lot of comments to commit Austin to this, so
I'll be there. Hopefully my voice will be in a better place in a couple of weeks, and that should be a lot of fun. So thank you for subscribing, hitting that little bell icon, thumbs upping the video, commenting, and visiting footballguys.com. I hope you have a great holiday. Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, and I hope that you stay safe and have an enjoyable time. We will see you next preseason for sure. We'll be back next season, and hopefully we'll see you in a couple of weeks for a special episode. On behalf of John Lee, Devin Knotts, and Ryan Hester, I'm Austin Lee saying thank you for watching, and thanks for being a football guy. To check out our content at footballguys.com, click the button on Devin's face. To subscribe to our YouTube channel, be sure to click on the button on John's face. And if you'd like to see our latest video, click on the giant video in front of Ryan's face. Click any of those now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.